Well, Israel and Lebanon's militant group Hezbollah have exchanged near daily fire since the war in Gaza began almost 9 months ago. And again, fresh cross-border fire reported. This week, though, saw fewer missiles fired, but an increase of threats from both sides, raising fears once more that the war could turn into a broader regional conflict. Meanwhile, the U.S. voiced concern about Israel's Iron Dome's capacity to stop Hezbollah's many precision missiles. Shirley Sitbon has more.
There has been daily cross-border fire between Israel and Hezbollah, like here in Odaise, Lebanon, intense pressure and many threats. These images showing residential homes and sensitive sites in Haifa, the largest city and port in the north of Israel, were filmed by Hezbollah with at least one UAV. Meanwhile, Israel released more footage of its forces hitting Hezbollah targets. World powers have tried to settle the unrest through diplomacy to avert an all-out war and a regional escalation. After Israel's defense minister said the army is achieving readiness, U.S. officials warned Israel's Iron Dome air defense system may not be able to cope with Hezbollah's missiles and drones. The armed group has stockpiled large numbers of Iranian precision-guided missiles and munitions.
This means a lot of hits. Iron Dome will not be able to cover everything. We may be cut off electricity, cut off internet.
A senior U.S. administration official has told CNN they assess that at least some Iron Dome batteries will be overwhelmed. Washington says it's pushing an agreement that would bring both a ceasefire in Gaza and on the Lebanese border.
Well, for more, let's speak to Filippo Dionigi, a senior lecturer of politics and international relations at the University of Bristol. Hello to you, Filippo. Thank you for speaking to us. Do you share Washington's assessment that the Iron Dome might be insufficient to meet Hezbollah's capacity?
Well, if they say so, that's probably because they mean it. The reality is that the Iron Dome also in the past has shown that it has a saturation limit and it has only a degree of capacity to, in fact, respond and react to the threats to which it's subjected, not only from Lebanon, but also from other potential sources of threats, including Iraq, for example, we saw. And that means that, yes, there is a possibility that the Iron Dome may not be sufficient to guarantee the security that Israel is looking for. We also saw that recently Hezbollah has released a video that was allegedly recorded with a UAV flying over northern Israel and doing so undisturbed without, being targeted or taken down from the Israeli military. And that is also another signal that in reality Israel might be more vulnerable to Hezbollah's threats than he believes it is. And therefore, yes, the situation may be more dangerous than I expect it to be.
Yeah, Hezbollah calling that flying drone a psychological warfare. For months, we've heard from Hezbollah issuing these threats since the war began in Gaza almost 9 months ago. We've been talking about fears of a broader conflict. What struck you about their actions this week that stood out from those previous months?
I think we witnessed an increase in the level of threats that have been issued towards Israel on both sides. In reality, what we notice is that there is a constant qualitative change of the type of weaponry that they show and that they demonstrate of being capable to use against Israel. They also show a higher degree of intelligence and knowledge of the ground, as we saw from the video that was shared by Hezbollah, as we were saying a minute ago. And therefore, the reality is that they are making a show of their military capacity. We still don't know exactly the depth of their military capacity in reality, but we increasingly learn about it. And that is, that has two meanings. On one hand, it means issuing threats against Israel, but on the other hand is also trying to increase the credibility of their deterrence capacity against Israeli attacks. Let us remember that one of the key concepts that Hezbollah's Secretary General often mentions in its speeches is the so-called deterrence equation. That is the capacity of the two sides to deter each other and therefore to refrain from fighting each other into an all-out war, and instead trying to balance each other and maintain a degree of stability, at least, on the border between Lebanon and Israel.
What does that mean on the ground? U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken told these Israeli officials to avoid escalation. Where is the line between deterrence and escalation?
Well, it's hard to say. It's a tricky balance. Right now, what we're witnessing is a constant exchange and a constant level of threats going up. I think what could really make a difference is, for example, Israel targeting some very high-profile members, or as they did already before. But again, also that may not necessarily be what will cause a war. What perhaps is going to be really cause of difference is perhaps beginning of operations on the ground, such as with a ground invasion on both sides. Those are kind of red lines that will trigger greater reaction at that level. But also from the latest speech of Nasrallah, we saw that Nasrallah himself has said that if a ceasefire is established and accepted in Gaza, Hezbollah will cease hostilities against Israel, at least for the time being. And that opens a possibility for greater security also on that front. Yeah,
and let's just play devil's advocate and say that the mediators aren't able to reach a ceasefire agreement. Where does this leave the Lebanese people? They're in full-blown economic crisis. How do they feel about a possible new front of this war?
Well, in general, I don't think no one welcomed this war, neither the Lebanese people nor the Israelis, in fact. I mean, the reality is that the escalation of this war to an all-out war itself will produce insecurity and further economic consequences for Israel and Lebanon. Israel is obviously in a better economic situation to deal with such occurrence, but obviously wouldn't be happy about this, of course. And Lebanon would be devastated, of course. As you said, Lebanon since 2019 at least is basically bankrupt. It had to it wasn't capable of paying for its public debt any longer at that point. And therefore, an all-out war with Israel will further exacerbate what is already an already disastrous economic situation, unfortunately.
Filippo, Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah also threatened nearby EU member Cyprus if it opened its airports or bases to Israel. How should the bloc respond?
I think we need to read the situation with the due attention. I think obviously Nasrallah's words were aggressive and concerning, of course, but it was also a way to say stay out of this conflict because otherwise you will become part of it and therefore you'll be dragged into it. I think Cyprus should act in its best interest in this sense, and possibly its best interest is that of remaining relatively neutral with regard to this conflict. Lebanon is one of the major, if not the major, economic partner for Cyprus, and Lebanon also on its own side has excellent relations with Cyprus itself. They are neighboring countries, therefore. Opening another front is in depth, between those two countries will be against the interest of both countries. So my sense is that the response should be firm, but should also be very much prioritizing political and diplomatic negotiations over an unnecessary display of force.
Filippo, thank you very much for your time. Filippo Dionigi from the University of Bristol.